What's up, guys? So if you saw my last 300 video, you know I didn't have four-wheel drive, so we're going to investigate why. So this is the wide open 424. It's a direct knockoff of the old Warren 424. There's some differences, like there's grooving on the shaft here. You see how there's a little texture, which isn't great for seals. Basically, they took the Warren design and made it a little bit cheaper and sold it for the same price. So I'll put this up here for now. So this is the actual gearbox of it. This down here is what's called the plunger. So this is what you pull to actuate four-wheel drive. It's a really simple mechanism. It's got this little thing in here, two ball bearings that slide through those two holes. Those pop out when this pushes on them, and it locks it in to the groove in there. Very simple. You have to clean this thing out and rebuild it a lot. It's not sealed very well. The Warren was the same way. As you can see, there's a little bit of rust and stuff in mine, but I do a pretty good job keeping it clean and oiled. Sometimes these balls just disintegrate because they get so rusty. So that was my first suspect thing, because I could push it in and out and it didn't feel quite right. So when I took that apart, the cable looked like this. So obviously something bad had happened, and when I went to go engage it, it bound the cable up on top of itself. And that cable's obviously broken. I need to replace this whole cable assembly at a minimum. But I went a step farther than that. I want to say, okay, well, maybe there was a problem in the gearbox that caused it to caused the cable to fail. So I wanted to look for contamination in here. If you look in here, it's got this nice blue thick grease. No signs of contamination. That gasket was holding well. Obviously I destroyed it taking it apart, so I got to get a replacement gasket for that. It works like a little transmission. So there's two shafts, each with a gear on them, and there's a coupler. The coupler in two-wheel drive position slides all the way back, and four-wheel drive position slides forward enough to engage this. You can see that there's a spring on both sides of this shift fork. So that acts like it's actuated, right? Like you push the coupler this way with this little brass thing, that spring holds the pressure. When they line up, it engages. It's a great design. Warren did a really good job with it. It's just not being executed as flawlessly by Wide Open. What should happen is, as soon as you press this in, it should try to suck itself into four-wheel drive, right? Because cables aren't great at pushing, they're better at pulling. So when I disengaged this, it didn't suck itself into four-wheel drive, and when I had to push on it, the cable folded on top of itself and broke. Now the question is, where did that resistance come from? So we're gonna take this cable apart, completely disassemble it, and try to figure out where the tight spot is and make sure it's nothing in this mechanism. And then once we're all done, we'll clean out all this grease, clean out those gaskets, order a new gasket kit, order a new cable. And this is an absolutely crucial part of the bike. A 300 is not fun to ride on big tires and all-time four-wheel drive, especially with a front locker or a spool. Without this, my front locker is almost a spool. It's only a little better. So I've got to get this working to keep the bike rideable. All right, we've got a complete disassemble that took all of 1 minute. So you take off this little E-clip, take off this brass spacer, take off that spring, shift fork slides off. So all of these go on this shaft, by the way. Laid out like an exploded parts diagram. And then you can get completely disassembled. And you can see that the splines look good. There's no rounded edges on the gear teeth. So what I was worried about was that, someone said to me, he will not be named, this is only good for up to a 28-inch tire. I disagree. I think that looks fine. I was running 32-inch paddles on here. I don't think the teeth have been damaged, mostly because I know how to engage it. If you were trying to jam this in gear with big tires at the wrong time, yeah, you damage it. But if you use it properly, I don't think that you're going to have a failure here or here. What the failure was, see the little rust on this pin right here? This is what your shift fork slides on. So if you get some rust there between that and the shift fork, that's what happened. The shift fork stuck on that shaft and couldn't slide easily. And these springs go here and here and here, and the actuator goes underneath there. So this holds the shift fork, and then that shaft on the cable slides through the shift fork and actuates it. Your snap ring goes right there. See all the rust in there? That was the problem. So either water got through this point right here, through these threads, which I think is unlikely, or water got all the way down through the cable and rusted that out. Once that started to stick, the cable couldn't actuate anymore, and it jacked that up. Now this could have totally been solved if everything was properly greased. A little bit of water got in there and did all this damage, and that's because this was dry. If this was greased properly, you wouldn't have had that issue. Everything else was greased properly, but that wasn't. Also here, if this was packed full of grease, maybe not that thick blue grease, but another grease, this wouldn't have happened. So this whole problem could have been easily solved by properly greasing it. So when I get my new one, I will grease it all properly and seal it properly, and it shouldn't have this issue again. But unfortunately, there's nothing I can do with this, right? I could straight in and put it back together and it would work okay for a little while, but it's pretty much a time bomb. I'm debating trying to do that though, because this cable doesn't really need to push once it's all working perfectly. All it needs to do is pull. So I don't know. I might try to fix it. I love fixing things. I'll probably fix it and then I'll order a new cable just to be safe to swap out next time. All right, so it's all rebuilt. That cable is kind of sketchy, so I adjusted in such a way where you never have to push in on it. So there's 4-wheel drive, right? Shafts spin together. There's 2-wheel drive. So I fixed it. It's only a matter of time before that cable bunches up in there again because it's damaged and it's lost about half of its threads. But the proper way to engage this is to pull out on it, press the button, and let go. Let it engage itself. And then once it engages, it'll suck itself down. You see how I did that? Never push in on it. If you have to push in on it, there's a problem with your cable or that pin has some rust on it and it's sticking. So again, just push in. See, it's not all the way down yet. I pretty much did that time. It's already lined up. So let's do more realistic ones. So we'll get it. So it's 2-wheel drive, get it off a tooth. Push it in. See, it's not down all the way, but as soon as I turn the shaft and it engages, it'll suck it down. See? So shouldn't have to be pushing it down. Something I do is, you might be able to see it, I added a little O-ring right there. There is an O-ring in here, but I just try to put that there to keep mud out of that group. So when I'm in 4-wheel drive, that O-ring sitting there is a little extra protection. But I got it working good. It'll probably fail again soon, so I'm gonna order a cable. This thing's very picky though. Like my old worn one, I had a cable that was rubbed through, it was full of water for years and it still worked. This thing, the slightest amount of rust got in here, locked up. It's being made cheaper, not being greased as well, it's not being assembled as well. So something to keep in mind, not that we have a choice, but whatever. Another thing I just noticed when installing it, this seal is not put in properly. You can see how it's kind of caved in and the lips flipped in a couple spots. It's not really leaking yet, but it will start leaking eventually. Just another example of how these things are not put together nearly as well as the worn ones. All right, it's a little demo. I got it working. Obviously I'm bored. I'm stuck inside. Well, not really inside, stuck at the house. Because coronavirus, stay home everybody. So 2-wheel drive, press the button and release. 4-wheel drive, yay. If you try to stop it, the locker kicks in, but otherwise, see it's locked. As soon as we put it in 2, hear the ratchet, it's a Detroit working. But we put it back in 4 by just pressing the button. Don't push in, let it engage itself. Good to go. Low gears, horse, very low gears. No, it's not even engaging this, the triple clutch. I mounted this with some hose clamps a little different, a little more rigid. I mounted that a little different with some zip ties, a little cleaner. But yeah, it's 4-wheel drive again. So now we'll go hit those same holes and not get stuck.